Welcome to the USA Dog Behavior Podcast, where we explore one simple question. Why is your dog behaving this way? Whether it's aggression or fear, anxiety, resource guarding, excessive barking, or another challenging and frustrating behavior from your dog, every behavior has a reason. Every behavior has a root cause. I'm Scott Schaefer, a certified canine behavior consultant and aggression specialist based in Dallas, Texas. Through comprehensive online behavior assessments, I work with dog owners throughout the United States to better understand their dog's behavior. Let's get started. In the last episode, I talked about 5 things dog owners do that drive me crazy. And I figured that if I'm going to pick on dog owners, it's only fair that I turn the microscope around and take a look at a segment of my own profession. So today, we're talking about 5 things dog trainers do that drive me crazy. And before I start irritating every dog trainer who's listening, let me say this. Most trainers I know care very deeply about dogs, or they wouldn't be in the business. They want to help people, and they want to help dogs. And there are many really talented trainers doing excellent work. Okay, let's get that out of the way. I think we all know that, of course. But dog training is an unusual profession because there are no government licensing requirements. A dog trainer can have extensive education, certification, years of supervised experience, and continuing education. Or they can be any individual who can decide tomorrow morning that they're a professional dog trainer, even though they've never done anything in the business ever. They can get some business cards and put up a website. Both people can put the same title on a business card. Very experienced and qualified, and 0 experience and unqualified. So experience, education, professional judgment, and knowing your limitations matter a great deal in this field. With all that said, here are the 5 things that drive me crazy about dog trainers. Number 1, promising that everything can be fixed in a board and train program. So let's talk about what a board and train program is. Board and train program is just shorthand for any type school situation where you drop your dog off for 2, 3, 4 weeks and come and pick them up at the end of that period, and the dog is what you want it to be. They've trained it in your absence. But let me start by making an important distinction about board and train programs. I am not against board and train programs. There are excellent board and train programs run by very capable trainers. I know many of them. For certain training goals, intensive daily work with a professional can be extremely helpful. What bothers me, though, is the idea that virtually any behavior problem can be sent away and fixed in a predetermined amount of time. Give me your dog for 2 weeks. Give me your dog for 4 weeks, they say. When he comes back to you, he'll be all fixed. But dog behavior doesn't work that way at all. Suppose you send your dog away because he goes crazy when somebody comes to your front door. It's a common problem with dogs. At the board and train facility, there is no front door to your house. The dog is not in its territory, which is very important when treating this kind of aggression. And perhaps most importantly, you aren't there. Dogs learn in context. They're not in their house. Skills have to generalize from one person, place, and situation to another. And there's an even larger issue when we're dealing with things like fear, anxiety, resource guarding, or aggression. Those are not simply obedience deficits. If a dog is aggressive towards strangers because he's frightened of unfamiliar people, teaching him to sit, heel, and stay may make him appear to be more controllable. That could be useful, but it hasn't changed how he feels about strangers. And that's the essence, i.e. root cause, of the dog's aggression problem. That's the difference between controlling behavior and actually addressing its underlying cause. If I have a client who used a board and train program before seeing me, I always want to know what happened when the dog came home. Was the owner trained before they brought the dog home? How were new behaviors transferred into the home? What happened when the problem resurfaces? And it will. What's the follow-up? A board and train can be part of the solution, but putting a dog on an airplane to dog training summer camp and having him come home permanently repaired is not how complex behavior works. It just doesn't. All right, number 2, use of shock and prong collars. So if you're a regular listener of this podcast, you know how much I love those. Well, of course, I'm being sarcastic. This is one where my position has become increasingly firm over the years. I don't believe shock collars and prong collars should be dog training tools. And that position isn't based simply on whether I personally like them. There's a growing body of research looking at the welfare consequences of aversive training, like shock collars and prong collars. And major professional behavior organizations have increasingly moved toward reinforcement-based methods only. The American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior recommends reward-based training for both ordinary training and behavior problems, and recommends against methods designed to cause pain, fear, or emotional discomfort. Now, here's an important distinction. Can punishment change behavior? Absolutely. If behavior couldn't be changed through unpleasant consequences, punishment wouldn't exist. A shock collar can stop a dog from doing something. A hard leash correction with a prong collar can stop a dog from doing something also. The question I ask is different. What has the dog learned, and what has happened to the emotion underneath the behavior? Let me give you an example. Suppose a dog growls when an unfamiliar man approaches him. Why is he growling? Maybe he's afraid. Now suppose every time he growls, we correct him harshly with a prong collar or a shock collar. Eventually, he probably will stop growling when strangers approach. Have we made him less afraid of unfamiliar men? Of course not. Of course not. We have simply trained the dog that approaching men are scary and predict pain. And this growling they're doing when that strange man approaches, that's information for us. It's part of the dog's communication system to us. In many cases, it's the dog saying, "I'm uncomfortable. Please give me some distance from this guy." I would much rather address the fear than punish the warning. That doesn't mean dogs shouldn't have rules or boundaries. They absolutely should, of course. Reward-based training does not mean dogs get to do whatever they want. It means we teach appropriate behavior while trying to minimize unnecessary fear, pain, intimidation, and risk. Before we continue, I want to take a second to tell you how I help dog owners dealing with serious behavior problems like the ones we talk about in this podcast. I work with clients throughout the United States through comprehensive online behavior assessments where we identify why the behavior is happening, discuss safety and prognosis, and develop practical recommendations tailored to the client's individual dog. If you'd like more information about working with me directly, please visit usadogbehavior.com. Now let's get back to today's topic. Here's number 3 of the 5 things that drive me crazy about dog trainers. Getting into aggression cases when you don't have the background to do so. Of all 5 things on my list, this is the one I take most seriously, obviously, particularly when we're talking about aggression toward humans. There's a big difference between helping a dog learn basic obedience and evaluating a dog that has bitten someone. Basic obedience, kind of low risk. Evaluating a dog that has bitten someone, now we're getting into more risky situations. with liability and so forth. If I'm dealing with a dog that has seriously bitten someone, I need to think about much more than whether I can stop the dog from lunging and barking at strangers. I want a detailed behavioral history to start out with. And an experienced professional knows what questions to ask. Things like, who was bitten? What happened immediately before the bite? How severe was it? How was the bite graded? Has a dog bitten before? What's the bite history? How predictable is the aggression? What triggers it? Are children involved? Can the triggers realistically be managed? Is the dog fearful? Is there a medical pain issue? Resource guarding, territorial behavior? Do we need to do a medical evaluation? Could medication play a role? And then there's one of the most important questions of all. What is the realistic risk going forward? That's a very different level of responsibility. And here's something I wish more professionals were comfortable saying. I don't know. Or aggression isn't my specialty. Or I don't deal with cases of human aggression. Or finally, I think you need somebody with more experience in this particular area. Those aren't embarrassing things to say to clients. Those are professional things to say to clients. I refer cases myself. I don't know everything. Sometimes the owner needs a hands-on trainer with a particular skill set that I don't provide. For example, if someone wants to teach their dog service dog skills such as medical alert, mobility assistance, or guide dog capabilities, I'm not an expert in those areas. Do I know something about those things? Yes, but not enough to take on a client like that. Knowing when to refer isn't an admission that you're bad at your job. It's evidence that you understand your job. All right, number 4 of the 5 things that drive me crazy that dog trainers do. Trying to be everything to everybody. This one fascinates me because you see businesses advertising an incredible assortment of services in the dog world. And I am not exaggerating when I give you this little example here. Yes, we're ABC Dog Training Company, and we do puppy training, basic obedience, advanced obedience, agility, dog walking, daycare, boarding, grooming, board and train, separation anxiety, resource guarding, aggression, service dogs, behavior consulting. And sometimes one person or a very small staff supposedly does all of this. That's kind of a lot. Now, a larger facility might legitimately offer many of the services I listed above because different people within the organization have different specialties. That's perfectly reasonable. But the idea that one person is an expert in all of those things, I'm always skeptical. I really am. The longer I've worked this profession, the narrower my own practice has become. Interesting. So I started out many years ago doing a little more than I'm doing now. But I've focused in on behavior issues, serious behavior issues. That's not because I know less than I used to. It's because I know more. I know more about the thing that I wanted to specialize in. And knowing more makes you aware of how deep these specialties actually go. The nuances are important. My practice today focuses heavily on serious behavior problems, particularly aggression, fear, anxiety, resource guarding, and complex cases where owners need assessment and direction. More than that, I only work with adult dogs as well. I have really focused in on the particular issues with dogs, and I think most dog professionals should do the same in their area. I don't operate a daycare. I don't groom dogs. I don't teach agility. And there are plenty of obedience trainers who can run circles around me when it comes to preparing a dog for an obedience competition. That's what they do. They're experts at that. There's tremendous value in knowing your lane. We accept specialization almost everywhere else in life. Think about that. Your family doctor isn't your cardiologist, your orthopedic surgeon, your dermatologist, your dentist, and your physical therapist. We shouldn't expect one canine professional to be every possible kind of dog expert either. All right, the final one, number 5 of the 5 things that drive me crazy about dog trainers. never picking up a serious academic book on dog training and behavior. The truth is, in this business and in any profession, you have to constantly be reading and studying this stuff if you're serious about being in the animal behavior business. Experience is essential. You cannot learn to work with dogs simply by reading books, of course, but the reverse is also true. You cannot develop a complete understanding of behavior simply by watching the dogs in your care. Here's the trap. Humans are terrific at seeing patterns, including patterns that aren't actually there. We do something. The dog does something. We conclude that the thing we did caused what happened next. And sometimes we're right, and sometimes we're completely wrong. That's why we need learning theory, research, controlled observations, and the accumulated knowledge of people who spent their careers studying behavior. You can't really be a high-level dog trainer, or especially a dog behavior consultant, by just kind of rolling your own. Just, oh, gee, I've worked with dogs for a long time. That's not going to work. A serious behavior consultant needs at least a working understanding of learning science, canine communication, ethology, fear, stress, genetics, development, physiology, environmental influences, and animal welfare. And nobody ever finishes learning this material. It's absolutely an aspirational goal. In fact, I have to say, I know 10,000 times more than I did years ago. But in a way, the more I learn, the more I realize what I don't know. It's really kind of an amazing thing. And I've talked to other professionals in other fields, and everyone kind of says the same thing. Kind of some professional humility there. Professional certification organizations require continuing education for exactly that reason. Science changes, our understanding changes, terminology changes, treatment approaches change. And sometimes something we were completely confident about 15 years ago turns out to be incomplete or actually completely wrong. Probably the very best example of this is the old theory about how our pet dog's behavior mimics wolves in a wolf pack in the wild. This theory is really laughable today by behavior professionals because it has been proven to not be true. Wasn't a bad theory decades ago, but we know it's not true now. Even the original author of this theory has renounced his earlier findings. I have a podcast and some blog articles, I believe, on this subject. I actually think the willingness to say, I've changed my mind about that, is one of the best signs of expertise and learning, because the alternative is deciding at some point that you've learned enough, that your observations in your small world, that represents the bigger world, and so you know everything. I've never met anybody in this field, including myself, who has learned it all. It's aspirational, never will. All right, let's wrap up. What have we talked about today? 5 things dog trainers do that drive me crazy. Here we go. Promising that every dog can be fixed in a predetermined board and trained program. 2, relying on shock and prong collars. 3, taking serious aggression cases without the appropriate expertise. 4, trying to be every kind of dog professional imaginable. And 5, believing that experience somehow eliminates the need for education. When I look at all 5, there's really one connecting theme. I think this is really interesting. This didn't occur to me when I was first writing this. And that theme is humility. Good professionals don't promise more than they can deliver. They think carefully about the consequences of the methods they use. They recognize when they're outside their expertise. They don't need to pretend they're good at everything. And they never assume they're finished learning. The dogs we work with deserve that level of professionalism. And the people who trust us with those dogs deserve it too. You can find additional articles, videos, and podcast episodes by visiting usadogbehavior.com. Almost all of this content is free. If you found today's episode helpful, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with someone who has a dog that could benefit from it. That helps more dog owners find the show and supports the work I do. Until next time, remember, your dog's behavior always has a reason. Find the reason, and you're much closer to finding the solution. I'm Scott Schaefer. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me for the next episode.